Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
We did not engage in conflict that was out of line with our mission.
Is it disloyalty? Is it sedition? Is it treason to oppose the hands of tyranny? Never!
I will never send troops anywhere on a mission of that kind without telling them that if somebody shoots at them, they can darn well shoot back.
I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty! Oh, give me day!
A dark cloud is finally lifting across the world as U.S. military intelligence and their global partners are destroying the deep state criminal power structure that has ruled over our planet for hundreds of years.
We are free with the God-given right, and we shall not yield that right to any power on earth.
Hi, I'm Scott McKay. The world is at, and I am your host on The Tipping Point on Revolution Radio, where every Monday from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, we bring you the latest in this ensuing takedown of this global criminal empire.
That's an image of strength.
You'll get the raw, hard truth here on The Tipping Point, so come join us Mondays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern in Studio B at revolution.radio.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it!
Conversations podcast. It's about observing cycles, sharing insights, and solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was. This is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019. So what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David Dubine. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this beautiful blue planet. Such a happy, wonderful thing to say every time to start an episode. You see my smile. You can hear it. It's always good to be positive once in the day and really feel something that makes you smile. So to think about being on a beautiful blue planet spinning through space, it does make wonder jump back as a child again. We're too locked into the matrix. We're too locked into programs of ways to think as adults. Can't we just go back to being children running through the fern forest there? Ransom Godwin, 420 TV, Freedomist Films. Thanks for joining and streaming tonight on Rumble. How you doing? Okay, maybe we'll start that again. I hope that you can hear my voice okay tonight as we try to assess what seems like another world of change that's happened in 2 weeks. You know, things seem to be amplifying again and again and again and again. So to talk about solutions tonight, in addition to what we know as the problems around the world, I'm going to start off by saying there's a lot of algae in the pond right next to where we are. There's two springs that flow into it, but during the summertime, there's a lot of algae. Now that algae can be used for two different things. One, incredible fertilizer. Algae is some of the best fertilizer you could ever imagine. And number two, if your birds will eat it, you got a protein source. They like vegetables. Our guinea fowl eat lettuce and other types of veg that we have scraps from. But then if you dry it out, you can turn it into a briquette that burns hotter than wood. And if you have the know-withal and you have an oil press and you get an enormous amount of that, like literally a ton of dried, you can squeeze it through a heated oil press and extract oil, which is also known as algae biodiesel. Speaking of solutions, because I have a pond that's full of algae and I'm just thinking, what should I do with it? I'm not sure. But there are some, copperheads around this time of the year. You just don't want to be putting your hand down in there collecting algae out of a lake in the southeast in summer. We'll be a little careful, snapping turtles, whatever. But it can be done. So Ransom giving me a sound check. You there, man?
Yes, sir. How's it going?
All right, I missed you on the intro.
Happy
What
Thursday.
Up? Yeah, 420 TV Freedomist Films. Ransom Godwin joining us. And Ransom, thank you for streaming us over on Rumble.
Actually, they locked me out. I couldn't sign into Rumble, so I'm recording it instead. So I'll figure that out right afterwards and upload it. Hello?
You're welcome to technology.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. It's the same, password and whatever that it usually is, but for some reason it says no today.
Oh no!
But we'll have it up. I'll have it up, so all those platforms will get to enjoy our conversation tonight. You were talking about burning pellets there. I just happened to relax today, and I was watching a Matt Powers episode where the guy, I think it was Matt Powers, but anyway, the guy was talking about growing a bunch of eucalyptus because it grows so fast and it has really high anti-rot properties. So he was making everything on the gardens and the farm there with this eucalyptus so that it wouldn't rot away right away. Plus, it was fast growing, and he was talking about, estimating the thousands of dollars you'd save by not buying lumber by just growing it real fast and then using it.
Yeah, cedar's the same way. You can save cedar. I went into this barn that was built in the 1940s. I was visiting a friend of mine, and he had an old mower, but they got an electric one, so got a sweet Cub Cadet mower that was used on a farm. So, I mean, we're using for the same. And I forgot what I was going to say going with that, but cedar trees. See, he'd taken a barn. There was an old barn on there that was built in the 1940s out at their property, and then he just put a new concrete floor in it, a new slab. And I tell you what, we were in there, and this old hard oak and the cedar, I swear to you, it looked like it was 5 years old. And he goes, no, this barn was built in the early 1940s. And I was sitting here to just a week ago or less, looking at that going, no way, that's nearly in perfect condition after all those years. You're talking 1940s, we're coming on 80 years almost. 70 years solid, So those kind of things, the eucalyptus, the hardwoods, and the cedars, they don't grow as fast as eucalyptus, but I'm sure there's many solution like hemp out there too if you wove that into something stronger.
Right. I think people are going to have to learn all of these secrets real fast. Anybody that's got land, I'm showing a article right now that's talking about, what we've been talking about for years now. It's kind of redundant that we keep even talking about it. You need to grow your own food. This article here is titled "More Americans Are Going to Go Hungry, and It's Going to Cost More to Feed Them." And this is all like just rolling out faster than anybody can absorb that hasn't been actually paying attention. They've been so distracted by politics and entertainment in the last couple of years, which I suggest to you is the same thing. I kind of was so curious. So I was watching the Alex Jones defamation. I wouldn't even call it a trial. That's what they're calling it. It was more like they made the guy sit there, shut up, not defend himself, and just, we're going to do this to you. And it was over things that they could prove, and that was obviously that he was having theories. He said maybe or maybe not, and that he didn't know repeatedly. So that's pretty scary in a broad sense, that anybody that's saying anything against the establishment media and I'm going to say government because I see that as the same entity basically at this point, um, you're going to have to be careful. They're going to try to come after you, using not only like social credit score. I mean, that's just a futuristic thing that's just around the corner. It's not so futuristic, but even worse than that, they're going to start using the courts against people, shutting off their bank access so that they can't even do business. And all of this at the same time as we're supposedly going into a phase where we're having food shortages. You notice they're not using the word famine now. They keep trying to use shortages like if don't worry about it, it's just a temporary thing. But why is it all accumulating at the same time, from crop failures to war to just obviously government policies that are driving artificial famines to come. I'll put it that way. So it's kind of bizarre, but I think Alex Jones is kind of a entertaining clown-like guy. However, he brings up a lot of real topics, and he has a good track record of turning out to be right. So he might have a weird way that he presents stuff, but the idea that you can get prosecuted and sued into oblivion for your opinion should scare every single person that's in media or tries to run a YouTube channel, or maybe they write a blog, or whatever it is. The idea that free speech is not actually protected if the courts and banking institutions and etc. can penalize you for your ideas. So back to reality, what does that mean? That means that you're going to have to find a way to grow your own food, make your own products, do barter with people that may also be cut out of the economic arena. Some Christians might kind of, correlate that to the mark of the beast, because they can't buy things or sell things or participate in the economy without a permissive number or something. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to roll out, but it seems most likely that they'll intertwine it into your phone that you'll need to have everywhere with you. I mean, it's going to turn into a legal thing more than a entertainment thing. Where's your phone? Where's your papers? It's a really scary time we're going in. It seems like people are kind of asleep and oblivious to this. So this may sound awful, but I think that people that have been paying attention and they actually know what's kind of moving our way should kind of take advantage of the fact that people don't know that they're going to need all of these different things. They're probably going to fight over the toilet paper, bottled water, diapers, baby formula, stuff like that. However, there's just such a big plethora of other things that are essential to living your life that other people have no idea about, including tools, especially, so that you can work on, fix, or do anything yourself as long as you have the material. And that kind of loops back to the thought of we really need to start having some of these answers to the problems, and growing our own materials, and stop relying on everything. I mean, there was once a point where everybody was a tradesman and they figured out where to get their supplies from, and if they didn't do that, they made them themselves. If we don't go back to that, I think that this headline will become true, that more Americans are going to go hungry and they're not going to have the money to feed themselves. Back to you, David, with the weather.
Well, I'll say that I've been able to cut 4 20-foot tall cedar trees and then take the branches off those. And now I have 4 cedar posts that are approximately the same diameter and the same height to be able to put up 4 sticks into the air that we could build a frame off of something else after concreting those in. Like if you're going to buy a post like that, those are $500-$600 posts each because they're made of that type of wood. Now they might not be exactly the 4x4, 3.5 by 3.5 going all the way up, but they are solid cedar posts. I've seen all these barns built by doing the exact same method. So then I bought this, it's a razor pull for doing logs to remove the branch or the knobs and kind of eyes out of the wood there to make it flat. You pull this thing towards you, and I tell you, be careful. I've sliced my thumbs a couple times. It is so razor sharp. That's why I've got those 2 giant wooden things to hold on to. Don't be playing around. You're pulling toward you a very sharp object. And, your thumbs get in there and ouch. Now, so, great now, but I can put alcohol on it and a Band-Aid, but in another situation, maybe you can't. So it's just like one level of separation. But if you're going to take a log down like that, cut off the branches, you're going to need a way to make it smooth. And using a pocket knife is not going to work. And using an axe, okay, but you're definitely going to leave a bunch of gouges in it that are going to be very unsightly and not keep the thing very strong. So you're going to have to come down like they did. You know, people had that sort of large curved knife that they pulled toward them, and it just whittled down and smoothly came along the trunk of the tree. So, you know, even thinking like this is pretty much outside people's parameters of what's possible if you're going to have to go to that level. Like, that's just pioneering style, you know? Taking a tree and turning it again is, what if you take a tree that has a Y in it, and then you could find two of those and then put a stick between it? That's how people build lean-tos. They just use nature and find the correctly grown shape of stick that they want. There was somebody who won a contest in Alaska. I don't watch TV, but I was told about this one. They had to go up in Alaska and survive by themselves. And one guy was a carpenter using all natural materials. And he was doing that. He was finding like trees that were 3 branches to grow out where he could make a corner into that. And there's all these tricks and things to learn and know about. But Ransom, that article, I have to look it up. I haven't seen it, but it's more Americans are going to go hungry. And then how are we going to feed them? See, this was already what I was talking about 6-8 months ago. The fertilizer shortages would hit now, and the crop tours would begin, and they would give rosy forecasts at first, and then suddenly we're not having nearly as much production as predicted. Well, the USDA is there to stabilize markets, not to give you the truth. So how would we feed these people? Okay, we tried these public works programs in the 1930s and whatnot. Well, that was the Great Depression. It's going to be very different now, but could there be public works cadres and unions of people spurred on by massive public spending to get people back to work after something, using the new dollar, not the one right now, but the new one that will come after this? But when the Americans go hungry, they're going to freak out, and they're going to want to get tools and seeds for next planting season. And we talked about this before, Ransom, I think even last week or the week before. 40 million people want something where there's only 1 million of it, and then what? You got 39 people that go without. But that going without is going without me with even a chance to feed my family. So big businesses will probably come out of nowhere using parts of automobiles. Like, you go to a junkyard, I mean, if you had an arc welder and to be able to cut something out of that steel frame right there, boom, you got all kind of flat metal to use. You could, remorph it into shovels and hose and all kind of stuff, because, steel on a car is tough. And it's already got angles and bends and stuff in it. You just have to tweak it a little bit. So I would imagine step 1 would be going into the garden tool shortages springtime, like February, March, April. But by May and June, they'll see that there's such a huge, gigantic, unbelievable opportunity to go to any junkyard and buy all that metal and then reshape it into all the garden tools and then sell them at a premium, right, when there's like this most massive demand. Like there was COVID, I think it was, what was the most massive demand? Like, was it face masks or whatever in the beginning, and you couldn't get it, and then suddenly everybody started to manufacture it? Well, it'll be like one of those. But if you had scrap metal, you'd be able to fashion all those shovels, rakes, hoes, spades, cutting implements, handles, all that kind of stuff. I don't know. There's huge opportunity in this, but there's also going to be a lot of people who just didn't get the messaging. Maybe they did, and they put their head in the sand. Because Rancid, I've been reading a couple new psychological studies here where they're saying that, 90% of people will not do anything to help themselves. You'll get that borderline 5% over into the 85%, but they'll only do the very bare minimum just to get by. And the other 10% are squeezed between the top 3% that are like ultra preppers, and then the other 7% who are actually getting ready and taking action, buying some land, growing some food, learning, how to get food production on your own land and storing and saving things. There's only like 7% of the people in the whole states doing that. And then if you do have to go to that lifestyle, there'll be another 5 or 6% that'll come in max. And the rest of them will be like too much trouble. And that's weird, because that's 80% or plus of people that would just say, all right, do whatever, I need to do anything. And they still have the majority at that point of brain dead, which is, even after all this going through, people still will not wake up. It is unbelievable that we're so far down this water slide so far and people still didn't realize. Oh, man. What kind of world are we in? I'm wondering if I'm living in a computer hologram, really.
We might be. I mean, that is a theory. What we won't be eating is probably pigs because they're gonna change that over to the transplant organ, um, I guess industrial complex, if you want to call it that. Think about how less likely you are to eat pork in the future if some of these animals start getting out of the facilities that were meant for organ transplant, and then besides the crazy headline here, scientists reanimate dead cells in pigs, a potential breakthrough for organ transplants. Now, just skip over the part that they're using dead pork. The whole idea that it's ironic, and I know I brought this up before, that the first, successful pig transplants and all of the legal uh, work that it took to get it to where they can legally start doing it just happened to show up recently after sad we'll just leave it that way. Sad things have been happening the last couple of years, but the idea, this is kind of when I immediately saw their picture of this sow and all her little piglets. I was thinking, it only takes about one of these to populate hundreds or even thousands out in the wild. So if things start to fall apart, people don't pay attention to everything as closely as they used to. But back to what you were saying, that's just one idea. I was going to throw that out there, but kind of back to what you were talking about cannibalizing things around you to use them as tools. And the amount of people that won't do these kind of things to help themselves. I have a good example of that right now. I actually have history of working with taking apart and putting together cars, and as a trade. Really, all you need to take apart any car basically is one metric set or a standard set and a drill. And there's placements of spot welds all over the vehicle where the robot made it, and you just drill those out, and the entire car comes apart, basically like an erector set. But yes, the some of the pieces on that car can be used for anything, and it's fairly easy to work with. It's meant to bend because of crumple zones and whatnot. But back to what I was saying about the 90% of people that won't do anything. I have a whole collection of tools in my yard. Basically, they're starting to clutter up the place of hose, size, tree trimming stuff, just all of these things that people, one, don't want to do the work. So they bought the things thinking that they were going to use them. And then they kind of left them outside neglected or whatever until they donated them or threw them away or whatever. And then somehow along the lines, I get a hold of them, and they're all tools that still work. Most of them need handles, and it kind of goes to that point. I'm willing to spend the effort of 10 minutes to put a new handle on an old piece of iron and have a brand new, fully functional, garden or construction tool. It's so crazy. And I've been collecting wrenches and screwdrivers and all of these things. So I like to have way more tools than a single person needs. But when you think about if you can't just go to the store or get something and something breaks, you're out of luck, as they say. But not if you have 6 or 7 replacements sitting around already that are the same thing. It seems redundant, but redundancy is kind of the best prepping that you can do because you always know that you have another one. Another, idea that I've been living by the last decade or so is to always buy things in pairs or triplets so that if one breaks, I have, another one already, and I also have parts to replace it or fix it. And sometimes you end up with 2 broken things. And then you can make one out of both of them. But the idea to always have, redundancy there is something that militaries and anybody that's ever succeeded at doing something almost impossible, that's one of the main key components of their success is the fact that they had redundancies ready to go in case things fail. So if we start living our lives like that, and there's all these signs in the news, admittedly, they're not so truthful, yet they do like to push certain agendas. So when you see their agenda being pushed everywhere you look, you should start thinking about things that are about to go wrong. And like, for examples, these supposed blackouts in Texas are making a certain company millions of dollars every time that happens because of the way their blockchain's set up. And so you know that whenever these events happen, and plus they're acting like 104 is some kind of outrageous super temperature in Texas for the summer, which let me tell you, it's not. That's an average normal temperature for most of Texas throughout summer, and New Mexico, Arizona, etc. I saw an article the other day from Florida that they were really red alarming climate change because the hot temperature was 1 degree over the record. What was it? It was 1958, so like 70 something years ago, right? Almost 60 something years ago. It got 1 degree hotter in that amount of time. So I kind of was joking with the people on Twitter that posted that. I said, so you're saying it's been cold for 60 years? You know what I'm saying? Because the idea that you can just put some colors up in a big themed headline seems to really catch those 90% of people that also wouldn't do anything to save themselves. They're always looking for the answer from the supposed authoritative sources instead of just, like I said, clearly seeing a pattern and seeing what can go wrong and then setting up redundancies in case it goes wrong. If it doesn't go wrong, and if you and me and lots of other people are wrong and everything's dandy and rainbows and unicorns in the future for some time to come and we can all eat cake, then it wouldn't have hurt you to save those things. If, however, we turn out to be right, you're going to be glad that you thought about these things ahead of time.
Man, I would love to go to those days where it truly was like that, many years in a row, where you never really had to think about it. It was always, yeah, next, easy. It's always there, always was. You thought it always would be at a reasonable price, but you look at it now like, definitely a shift there. People continue to believe that we're going to go back to the old world that we knew in like 2018, 19, 2017. Remember those good old days of 2016? People just want to, in the mind, continue to live at that time because they just can't understand what's happening. You got the energetic shift happening too, along with all the, physical human shifts and then the geologic shifts or the earth shifts. So you got all these three moving in unison. So people's vibrations are changing because the magnetic field of the planet's changing, which then moves into the earth changes, which then comes into the food pricing and all the other things human related. Supply chain disruptions, all this, not as much wheat being grown, corn being grown. Those wars seemed a little planned to be at the perfect spot on the planet to do the most damage for supply chains for food. Just saying. Upsetting Ukraine took Russian wheat and Ukrainian corn off the market. And 30% of the world's supply just whoosh, vanished. That was pinpoint accuracy for taking out a food supply on a Holodomor type of plan. Aside from that, nature's doing its own thing. But see, you get into this feedback loop where the spirituality and people's intuitive sixth sense or just the way they perceive reality is changing because the electromagnetic field of the planet's changing. But that's changing the jet streams and cloud cells and creating different flows in what you consider weather or quote unquote climate. And then that in turn affects the food production. But all these three things are happening simultaneously: the destruction of what you consider civilization, including the food supply, and then going up. And then how are people spiritually supposed to handle this shattering of reality around them of things that used to be stable? You can't turn around and, I've been really talking about electromagnetic field on the planet, and here we got this incredible blue jet blowing out the top of a cloud. And that's one of the biggest ones I've ever seen. It actually looks like the purple, the way it hazes off into the end, is connecting to an electromagnetic field line from the sun directly now. So, you go back through the petroglyphs and different amazing rock artwork on canyon walls. And if that was to go out and amplify, that would glow in the sky, and you would definitely see that on the wall of a canyon somewhere, referencing what we're looking at here. So I mean, all this is in real time playing out, and then suddenly the Great Reset's here, and you can see how everything is dovetailing and overlapping at once. But see, that's subset A of information. Then what's next? You know, cold July in Australia. Are they experiencing a volcanic winter? Oh yes, they are.
Yeah, I don't want to get woo woo because I always do this to you, but
Go.
I've talked before about this idea of kind of genetic pollution. So I'll keep that short. GMOs, gene editing, mRNA, et cetera, et cetera. But I did bring up before that scientists keep pushing the idea that the male is going extinct and the Y chromosome is going to disappear. And they've been talking about that for some time. And then you get back to how they've actually gene edited some children in China. But here's an article from the Sun. I'm recording it. You can't see it, but they'll see it live. It's a blueprint to babies, and I brought this up before that soon. Just like those little animals that they clone and grow in a plastic bag, they really don't need people anymore. We're so technologically advanced. Some people may argue with this, but you only need robots and a couple of facilities and maybe a few humans to keep something going if you wanted to go down this avenue. And the avenue I'm talking about is growing designer human beings. And it used to be a thing that would be considered sci-fi because most people didn't think we had the science to accomplish something like this. But I'm here to tell you we do have that science, and they've been using it in different ways. But this is a new idea here that takes it to the next level, which you can kind of take into consideration that we've talked about AI running different programs before. So I'll just leave that AI part of it at that. But it's a baby blueprint. Babies created without sperm or eggs could be a reality after man-made embryos grown in the lab for the first time. So basically what they're letting the public know is further proof or demonstrating that they no longer need breeding regular Homo sapiens sapiens, whatever admixture of humans we are. That's kind of irrelevant, but we're here. We're the dominant species at this time. And we've talked a lot about extinction and speciation. The only difference being on this cycle, we are technologically advanced enough to eliminate breeding human people out of the equation and grow custom gene edited, designed and with AI's help. And keep that in mind, because when you get into a lot of these labs, they're using AI to design DNA. They can also print it and inject it into creatures that are already alive, but that's kind of irrelevant to this. This is talking about completely from scratch the ability to create an entire race, a new race of human beings. It doesn't say that they're creating a new race of human beings, to be fair, in the article. But what they are saying is that they can make humans without the help of humans. So no egg, no sperm, no parents. They can just load in an artificial egg some created DNA, and evidently we're at that point where we may be the Neanderthals of history if these technocrats get their way and take over. And if you've ever seen a more real example of the Great Reset, this is it. Resetting without humans. Now, what would you want to do if you were to accomplish that? Well, you might give them a third world war. You might, totally destroy culture in every place and demoralize human beings, dehumanize them, and then on top of that, start to starve them. Or maybe a big, quote unquote, natural pandemic might go around the world and take out a large portion of people for the next coming decades. And I'll leave that at that because it's so hard to get around the censors now, especially like to loop around what I was talking before. Now they can actually start doing real repercussions for telling people and showing people mainstream news and just having your own opinion on where the technology or even in general any subject could possibly go. So really, this is something that I'm not sure because I've talked about nanotech before and got banned off of YouTube. and I didn't even say anything that time. Like I didn't even have a theory. But this is not my theory. This comes from the article, the U.S. Sun, and it's talking about this, and you can look into it and find out that probably this article is somewhat backdated as far as new information. And some of these programs been going on for decades now. So yeah, you can think about that as you will, but there's no need to feed the massive populations if you already have backup plans, or at least the capability of just growing your own people.
You got a workforce in there. Russia's cold summer sees wheat protein drop. Yeah, so the carrying capacity of the planet, I'm wondering if it's somehow going to match with the rise of AI. Like there'll be an equilibrium as one declines, the other will ascend. Just saying. Because think about if there's 7.9 billion people on the planet, and let's say the census is correct, and imagine if 50% of that drops out. Well, there will be 0% chance that anything will be functional that was created in today's world. Because it would only be at half staff when the behemoth created today would expect 100% staff. They're so low now, the doors are barely unlocked and the lights are barely on when you look at the grand scheme of things. So if there was to be another, like even 10% taken out of the workforce, or people just disappearing off the planet, then things are non-functional. And I remember looking at this chart from the 1450s in England, and it compared cow, sheep, and goat as a flock animal. And it came into right at around 1450, 1460, that 10-year period was totally blank. No data was recorded because so many people had died off during one of the plagues that they didn't have enough people to keep records. There was not enough staff to keep the lights on. And how they found the information through proxy was the approximate number of people could be determined at the end of the event based on how many cases of candles that the monks had ordered for funerary rites. That was kept in way more detailed record than everything else at the time. Everything else didn't work except the church and its accounting of. So that business sphere out in the whole society just dithered away for 10 years, not even enough people to keep records. How low does the workforce need to go where there's no agricultural records kept for 10 years? That's the kind of change we're coming into. Now, granted, that was in the 1450s, but still, to miss that much data for large farm animals. But then the rest of the chart's really interesting too, because the more food costs, the more grain costs, the more food costs per people, the smaller the animal became the dominant herd species. So when grains are plentiful and they're cheap, it's all about the cow. But when we came into, I'm saying us as collectively, all the way through the last 700 years of human history here on the planet, around that 1460 era, right after they came through that lean era there was zero records kept. In the 1450s and 60s, goats were it because they're so small and they just eat anything on their own and they don't require very much food. And you can still get milk and meat. So that became the dominant. So you can start to see this shift off in trade, and you see all this whole narrative to try to eat different protein sources. What if they say insects and then you say, I want cow, and then, okay, you're like in a bargain in the middle. Okay, we'll agree on goat. We're going to agree on the goat. You get milk and you get a weed eater and you get a fun pet, and they eat, yeah. And at the end of their life, you can have them for meat. But I found that really carrying capacity balance. So then move it into our own world. if the population drops to that level, then nothing works at all. Nothing. You might be healthy and sitting hunky-dory, bouncing on the trampoline, but if there's nobody there to run the fiber optic cables or repair the electric lines on a lightning strike or a tree down on it, then what? You know, you can only go so far before everything breaks, and nothing at all is kept records-wise. I do believe, close period of history to look for is, like, say, 1400, 1450 England, to see possibly what happened during that time and then how society morphed into something non-functional, but then it morphed back out of it about 10 years after that point. But the type of food changed as well, and the wages of people who were being paid by grains, because you could get paid by barley or wheat for your day's wage, was cut by 4x, which means a 4 times increase in the price of the food. So if you got 10 pounds of barley as your wage for the day in, say, 1410, when growing conditions were really good, you had much higher output in the food, so you were paid more for the food. And then come into the 1450s, 60s, even up into the 1470s, you were still only getting 2.5 pounds of barley for the same day's labor. So think about that for a second. Even that's a 4x increase in the price of food, or what your exchange for food for precious metals was. Well, everybody's using gold and silver, and they were trading for the wheat, or you could get paid in gold and silver or the actual grain. We don't do that anymore. If you want a 50-pound bag of rice, your boss is not going to go, now, David, do you want to get paid 20 50-pound bags of rice for your month's work? You take a ton home on a pallet, or do you want me to like, get the paper, you know? Or you can imagine a boss, $25 an ounce on the spot. Okay, that's four ounces for every $100. All right, or I'll give you 40 ounces of silver, or you can take your 1 ton of rice, or nothing. You're going to take the paper and a central bank digital note, Federal Reserve note, and you're going to like it. So being paid in food actually really, twists everything around. And ransom, my memory is fading on me, so I'm curious. It was the shekel. It was how many grains of wheat to the shekel, like 247 or 250. But see, they base the silver weight off of the food weight. It's not the other way around. I guess you could look at it that way, but the grains of wheat determine the silver measurement. Like today, the silver measurement determines how many grains of wheat or how many kilos of wheat you can buy with a 1 ounce round of silver. Well, back then it was the opposite. The grain determined how much silver belonged to that grain, which is interesting. And they counted it down to the single grain. You did not put one extra grain. That'd be like giving somebody an extra $1 in their paycheck, you know. So it's weird how history is repeating right now. It's going in a loop.
Yeah, that totally sounds like owning your soul to the company store there. And also rations. I didn't know, so I looked it up. It says any various ancient units of weight, especially the Hebrew unit, equal about 252 grains of unit, or one silver coin weighing 1 shekel. 1 shekel being the 252 grains, according to the Troy measurement system there that the Hebrew were using. So I don't know what they were doing everywhere else, but you imagine giving away precious metal for its weight in a couple bites to eat. That's crazy.
Yeah, you just hit it. You just hit it so perfectly on the head. A loaf of bread, and you're giving away family fortune, right?
Yeah, you bring down your grandma's silver candle holders and stuff. I bet that's happened before. But I wanted to ask you, thinking about that, how do independent farmers or gardeners, I guess, really is what we're talking about on a smaller scale. True, it's a farm, but it's kind of like gardening on a larger scale. What do we do when the UN starts using its military force to pursue their climate agenda? Like you're seeing all through Europe, they're attempting to do. So this is, you got to fit this into the other things that are happening right now, like what's going on in Taiwan right now. If I've ever seen, I'm not going to say a staged event, but a set up event, sending Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan, even though they warned her not to go. And then China responding by saying they're going to be doing live military exercises over the island. with live ammo and stuff like that. It's crazy. But what really trips me out is Nancy Pelosi's known with siding with China on certain different agendas here in the U.S. So what is she really doing there? You think maybe she's negotiating Taiwan surrender from the other side? I'm really curious because I think the future of human beings is being decided in the South Pacific and excuse me if I could talk, the Strait of China there between Taiwan, Japan, the Koreas, and China. I think is going to be the epic center of what we're going to call World War III, and it's kind of hard to think that those countries that will be trapped in China's sphere, in my opinion, will stay, I guess, an enemy in trade. I think they'll become more allies because they'll have no choice. I mean, think about Japan. It's, they're locked on their island. So is Taiwan. They're kind of dependent on imports. So what do they do if China controls every bit of ocean around them? And it looks to me like the United States doesn't want to, uphold its values the same way we're doing in Ukraine, because we're all about liberation and freedom and being independent if it's in Ukraine, but we don't feel the same way towards Taiwan. As our Secretary of State just said the other day, that they have no interest in an independent Taiwan. But at the same time, you got Nancy Pelosi acting like, she's their ally and going over there. I don't know what you make of that, but I think that this is going to be a trend that they're going to be using to push the idea of global famine because of trade routes cut off, nations putting up new alliances with new nations and messing up old trade deals, and old trade routes are about to start being pretty weird. So we're going to be in a weird time. And the technologies that are being used now don't seem to be human friendly. But there is some good news because there's this article that I came across talking about mammoth bones, ghost footprints, and the new heated debate about the first humans in North America. So it looks like we've possibly been here as humans for 30,000 years at least. Right where I live is now considered the oldest footprints in America, and they're dating that at 23 to 25,000 years. So people were here long before the ice bridge or the Bering Strait thing. And now they have what is being debated as a 37,000-year-old mammoth found here in New Mexico that seems to have human cuts, breaks, and things on the mammoth, that they were butchering these super big animals 40,000 years ago right here in North America. And then fast forward a little bit to the end of the Hunger Dryas, that the people that lived, whoever it was that lived here in the Americas, had to do exactly what you were talking about a minute ago, which is totally switch up their food style and what they ate. They no longer had these megafauna to, tear the carcasses off and feed thousands of people. I mean, think about the work and how much it would take to actually butcher and process all of these big animals. And then all of a sudden that just stopped because they weren't around anymore. So humans obviously had to find out new ways to eat, new ways to farm, and new ways to replace their diet. And now we're looking and facing an artificial Hunger Dryas, if you want to look at it that way. I mean, just like you were saying, we're going to have to start finding new food sources. And then we also have the world government pushing the idea that we need to change our, food sources. I'm not eating bugs. I'd rather eat a squirrel. I'd rather eat a rabbit. But the realization is if things collapse, those little critters that are around are going to disappear, not unlike the megafauna, disappeared too. And I'm not saying that man hunted those to extinction. I'm saying man had to deal with the absence of those animals all of a sudden. So put it in a new perspective here. If people start trying to eat out of nature, there's only so many deer, there's only so many rabbits, there's only so many squirrels, and you're not going to be the only one out there trying to get these resources. And I imagine with all of the, green movement, that they will try to outlaw, not unlike the sheriff of Nottingham days, outlaw eating the king's deer and the king's squirrel and the queen, all of that stuff. Instead, we have a bucket of mealworms for you. And if you don't like that, you can resort to cannibalism
I knew you were going to bring it up. I was just waiting. I knew it. I knew it. Couldn't wait till the second hour. I knew it. Go, man.
Yeah, right. Well, think about it. I mean, they're pushing that idea at a time where they're talking about food shortages worldwide. So, what scenario are they thinking is about to happen? And maybe it has something to do with them genetically engineering and reanimating dead flesh. Now, I'm not going to say there's going to be a zombie apocalypse, but what happens if one of these pigs that has parts of it that were dead or any combination of the weird technology they're doing get out into the food supply, things go bad for everybody, then of course people are going to be out there hunting those wild pigs and eating them. That's already like they're already pushing the cannibalism idea through that, and then now they're just straight up saying, hey, why not? We could save the planet by eating the dead. And it's Tuesday, but it's really Thursday because it's Miac. But what's the movie say? It's Tuesday. It's time for the green wafers or Soylent Green. It's on Tuesday. Are we getting there? Is that the same thing as this 252 grains of rice for your shackle as you go down and you get a half bug, half dead people sandwich from your local FEMA center? But don't worry, they'll have Wi-Fi for you to enjoy.
You should be an airplane announcer, dude. You have a great voice for that. Get in and eat your bug sandwich. I will not take part of that at all. But you painted a very scary picture for me there. You know why? Because I envisioned this in my mind when you were talking, and please don't hold it against me. But the thought flashed to me when you were talking about contaminated meat. Like, what if people do go to cannibalism because they're trying to normalize it as something not socially shocking? All these news articles I'm seeing, oh, yeah, it's part of rituals. Oh, it's part of society. It's part of the thing. It's part of the past. It's part of everything. Oh, you didn't know that? Oh, it's okay now. But like you said, what if the human that they were going to consume was completely contaminated, quadruple boosted and double vaxxed on Prozac and like a whole bunch of different kind of antidepressant medicines, and then you were going to consume that kind of weirdness is what came through my mind. And I was like, no, I never want to go down that route. You're going to need to grow your own food if you don't want to. See, I prepare myself pretty good, but anything could happen. But I definitely don't want to go down that route, and I choose not to. See, I choose not to. It's not that I'm going to be forced to make the choice. Even if I did, I'd prefer to err on the side of just, meditating into, crossing over to the other side versus getting, that hungry where I'd consume a person. Just won't cross that. Can't do it. Already made the decision. Won't do it. I'll just go sit under a tree and meditate until my time passes because I won't sell my soul to go down that route. There's some things that you can look at in spirituality and divinity if you're looking at an afterlife and a soul after. Well, for that little bit of small pain on the planet, I'm willing to go through that. So there's not so many repercussions, because that's never been right in any religious practice anywhere on the planet, really, that I can say that it stands out in text of things that it's all right to eat other people. It's just not. And to try to normalize it is the same garbage they're trying to normalize with many facets, and I'll try not to get you banned, so I'll leave it at that, but many facets of the society that we're seeing, that you looked as a kid, you would have taken somebody out in the back of the barn and just stomped them to bits, you know what I mean? But now it's normal. Like, no, there's things you just don't cross into. That's what's called morals. And you either have that boundary or you don't. And see, the people who are going to move through this time are going to have those levels of boundaries that they are not willing to cross. And once you get a group of people around that are believing some of the same things, then there's something that holds that community together, that trust factor, that you're not going to step over that, you're not going to cross those lines. Because, man, the world's getting sick and twisted, and they're trying to normalize this now. There must be something going on beyond the whole volcanic winter coming in the southern hemisphere, plus the crop losses happening now, the breakdowns in the supply chains, and all the chemicals for farming have broken down. So next year's shortages are going to be way, 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 way more severe than this year's for the planting season and the farm inputs going into that. So, what you're talking and what I'm seeing on the news too of sort of, it seems like it's about a year lead in. So Ransom, I'll ask you, Like, what do you think the lead-in time now is? Things we're seeing in the news before, bam, it's actually hitting and it has swept over society, not coming in swooping, but has swept over. You think like a year from the programming we're seeing now is going to be the society in the future? Because it seems like it's moving faster, and you can almost see what they're talking about today is going to be the tomorrow. Or not. But you got to think about that, how fast things have moved over these last weeks, months, and especially the year. Because when COVID came in, it was all new, it was scary, nothing new, and then there was drips of information that way something's not right. You can't talk about it, can't even ask a question like you should be able to do in science. If you think there's something wrong or another way to do something better or to disprove a theory, then you go for it. And that's called progress. You either prove it or you disprove it. Both okay. It's called science, and we move forward. But this time around, nope. No. Cannot talk about that. But that amount of time as a trickle in from when it was known and then suddenly it was a thing. So they can't do it with monkeypox again this time. It's just not going to work. Nobody's buying it. But food shortages are something very different. Fuel completely cut off, where you're just looking at Mad Max, like just a few run out of fuel cars laying on the road somewhere, that kind of thing. That's a new thing too. So you got to think levels of haven't happened yet would shock a society if it did. So if the food stops, boom, and if the electricity stops, bam, that's another one. And if the liquid fuel supply stops, boom, there's another one. If they made it all encompassing and so vast across the planet that it all happened to the whole planet at the exact same time, the exact same thing, like all fuel stopped, okay, then the planet would grind to a halt. And it would scare everybody, and then whatever, it would twist and morph again. But that whole lead in for the COVID thing up until that was like a year or so plus to get everybody into the scary and make the whole world turn on that narrative. But now it seems like it's happening a little bit faster. It's not going to be a year and a half or a year and 3 months. This time from the food is going to be from now to like September and October, like just literally a month or two from now. And it's going to start spinning like the disco ball that you don't want to dance to. David Dubine, Ransom Godwin. We'll be back in a couple minutes. Enjoy the break. Listen to the sponsors. Some music and message. We'll be back in 2 minutes. 2 seconds. Today.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Are you interested in the paranormal, murder mystery, real natural law? Do you enjoy interviews with amazing guests? Then join Crypt Rick every Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Revolution Radio. Studio A, freedomslips.com. Crypt Rick's I've been thinking. Welcome to the Crypt.
Join me at Revolution Radio, Studio B, at 11 a.m. on Saturday for Free Association, when we take a look at philosophy, spirituality, psychology, social issues, and geopolitics. It's every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern on Studio B at freedomslips.com.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Galactic Interstellar Council on Revolution Radio Studio A, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Join us as we traverse the starseed paradigm, as expressed in the time-space continuum that we know as the divine expression of love and light. Integrating this conscious unity into the galactic paradigm. So welcome all, both terrestrial beings and galactic beings as one. So be it. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
And welcome back for the second hour of many Ice Age conversations. I'm here with Ransom Godwin tonight from 420 TV, Freedomist Films, and I'm David Dubine. Before the break, we were talking about, well, Ransom was the younger Dryas and how the people of that day could feast on mammoths, but after that apparent comet impact on the ice sheet, temperatures plummeted and those megafauna, mega mammals, megaflora fauna was wiped back to nothing and incredibly small animals. And the people at the time had to adjust to that, a new food source. Less input, smaller output. We're coming into the grain shortages. We can't do cow anymore. We're going to move to goat or something smaller, guinea pig. I don't know. If you're used to feasting on mammoth steaks and then whoosh, a comet hits an ice sheet and the very next year, there's no more mammoths. You got to switch to something else like squirrel tail. And you're like, whoa, we were eating mammoth steaks. And now you want me to switch over to like squirrel's tail soup or something? I don't think so. You know, it's going to be one of those kind of shifts. So that's what we were chatting about before we went on break. And if you do appreciate free speech, I know we try to take it, but if we're streaming on YouTube, sometimes we do. We got to pull it back a little bit. Otherwise, full throttle ahead. So if you consider free speech something that you support, then head on over to freedomslips.com, Revolution Radio. Donation at the top, because they're in running costs, production costs, somebody on air to monitor. It takes a lot of work to keep it on. There's a lot of hours involved in it, whether you know it or not. So if you appreciate that, show some support. Now, Ransom, I'm trying to just think about this for a second. Think about the cataclysm that occurred at that time. You had a comet slam into an ice sheet. And the Carolina Bays apparently were formed by this ice. Now, Carolina Bays, there's all these impact craters, but they can't find any impact. Or there's like, okay, they have this huge giant hole in the ground, but they can't find what made the hole. And they're all pretty much the same trajectory. They all came from one direction. And they're super, 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 super dense. I mean, they just overlay each other. Sometimes craters have cratered within craters. And it's a huge, gigantic amount of these things. Like tens of thousands of these impactors came down. It's called the Carolina Bays. And quite famous to read about that. The lakes, the unknown reason for them. They know it was impacted by something, but what? That comet hitting the ice sheet ripped off and sent like shards of ice, some of them 50 pounds, some of them the weight of a car. Those chunks of ice flying through the air and just pounded that area over on the East Coast. They call it the Carolina Bays because it's out near in the Carolinas, heading even further up north. So there was a huge, gigantic impact. Now, what would the ramifications be for somebody who had seen that? And I'm wondering if there was any electrical interaction, because you got a big chunk of rock that's a different charge coming in through our atmosphere. There's got to be some electrical interaction in that. Like, what would they have seen? And then, like, if you're on the other side of the planet, that's why Africa had some of the largest animals left on the planet, like the elephants and things. That was on the other side of the planet and on the opposite side of the planet. Because if you look at where Canada is, it's way up in the north and over North America. But all the big animals like zebras and elephants and hippopotamus, those are way on the other side at the bottom of South Africa, completely protected on the other side of the planet. See, that's what saved it. That's why those larger than what we consider gigantic animals, but that would have been tiny or normal. Because see, those animals you see down there are not nearly the large size they used to be, because they were also affected. You're telling me that an ice comet slams on a thing, completely changes the atmosphere for decades, plural, and those animals down there wouldn't have been affected with their food source on how much like dust and debris and water vapor and clouds and things are in the atmosphere, like cooling a whole planet for like 10 years or more. Like those elephants are probably 5 times bigger than they are now, but you know, they also got hit with the amount of photosynthesis limited the size of the plants they could eat. And they also shrank in size. So if we take it to us, they're trying to get us to move off of larger animals onto smaller animals. But at the same time, I don't know, there's no way that people can live off nature. I was reading in the 1930s that book, The Great Depression Diaries. The woods were so hunted out that it would take you a lot more energy to go out and get it. And the small game was the first thing to go. Pigeons, any kind of small game birds like pheasants and quails and these sort of thing, gone. Deer's gone. Rabbit, like you say, squirrel's gone. And then they started going toward capturing live raccoons, and then they would clean them out for 3 days or 4 days with corn. I didn't know that. You don't want to, if you shoot a raccoon, you can't really eat. I mean, you could, but there's better ways to do it. Trap it and then give it a food source and clean it out for like 3 days using corn, specifically corn. And then they would harvest it for dinner. Groundhogs. Like, who eats a groundhog today? Nobody, but they ate groundhogs back then. There was thing talking about, if you have a shotgun, only hit it in the head when it just sticks its head above the ground, because you're going to have all those little tiny pellets in the meat stuck in the fat when you're cooking it in the oven. And you got to boil the thing for like 3 days also, and it's got this horrible smell. Like things you don't normally eat, people were eating. And that was just in the Great Depression, not after a cometary impact on an ice sheet or a meteor impact on an ice sheet. It was supposedly part of a comet, and then it turned into a meteor and hit, bam. So, Ransom, the question that I was getting to was, those people would have been affected greatly, and they would have known the change was there instantly. Like that would have been, even if it hit in Canada, they would have known within 24, at the very latest 48 hours, that the entire Earth's ecosystem changed, like dramatically. Like they might get a polar blast coming or in the middle of summer or something. But the same thing is happening with us, with humanity now. We understand that something just happened or is in progress, and it's going to be here. And what we consider as a time frame, maybe of society, is 24 hours or 48 hours. But for us, that's just a couple months coming away. So how do you think people are going to perceive the change when it finally hits? Just like an elephant in South Africa to finally perceive that the atmosphere shifted after a comet impact over Canada. Same, but different.
Right. You think there must have been like some caveman that told everybody, "Hey, we're having bug human sandwiches from now on because all of the animals are gone." It doesn't really matter what the cause of what it is when you get mass amounts of people or animals that don't have their normal food sources. They're going to try to survive. I mean, that's inherent survival instinct in all of us to eat, and that's where we get pushed into these ideas of cannibalism. I'm sure that in the past, at some time, at some of these traumatic events in history, there were forms of cannibalism, but they learned how to eat other stuff and seem to, for the most part, start avoiding that, except for the weird elite that arose out of that time period. And that is bizarre that if you think about that the elites were the ones into the blood sacrificing and things like that, and that might be actually associated to some kind of distant human memory of a time where people were driven to extremes. And I didn't quite hear what you said at the end of the last hour, but I thought you were asking me something about how long or how much time do you think they would foreshadow with the like articles and stuff like that before it's actual reality. And think about, I hope that it's not like normal, because there was the event 201 and things like that kind of indicated what we were going to go through in the next couple of years. And I would say that time period from the news cycle to the reality is usually only 3 to 6 months. It seems like that to me, at least in recent years, that things are exponentially happening faster, and they seem to be breaking it to society that's overwhelmed with shock. And, they can't get surprised anymore, really. It's like a dopamine junkie that's all out of dopamine, and you're not going to go up or down at all, because you're so spent from all the emotional up and downs that are given to you from the top down, and now they're giving us food crises and things like that. But I hope that when they start introducing ideas like eating bugs and cannibalism and things, that they're not foreshadowing their plans for the next 3 to 6 months, because that's horrifying. That would be just like the end of the Younger Dryas or the Great Depression, where people would immediately in the now have to figure out how to survive and what to gather, what to eat. And we've been kind of telling people that you should be prepared for that regardless of if it's going to happen or not. But think about this. For the last, I'm going to say 15 years, because I think it's a bigger cycle than just the news cycle. I think they hit you with science fiction or fictional scenarios in TV and movies first. And then they start slowly putting articles out that you would think, well, that sounds like a movie or whatever. And then they start increasing in number until you realize that sci-fi is now science reality. And I hope not, because let's think about the cannibalism aspect of this. They've been for at least 15 years, nothing but apocalyptic movies for various reasons. But in those movies and TV shows, one thing is a common factor in there, that they always demonstrate some kind of cannibalism. And then more recently, they've been doing stuff like a while back, there was a movie called The Road, in which something happened to the earth. They don't really say what it is in the movie, but it seems to be like the earth is out of rotation or something like that. And all the plants, animals, and insects start to die off, and human beings are left with the choice of suicide or running from cannibals. And then you get into like stuff with The Walking Dead, etc. But all of these scenarios have one, back in the background plot of humanity, and that's some kind of crisis that changes everything forever, and where whoever's left has to adapt to the new environment in an instant, like from the very next day. And I think that's something that they're about to give us. And I really think, in my opinion, that the food shortages are going to blend right into World War III or a war with China. And you mentioned earlier about how they want to regulate the digital money so that in the end, there really is only one kind of money. And we kind of know the fiat is in some real trouble right now. But here's a article out of AP News. New crypto oversight legislation arrives as industry shakes. And it's further evidence that all the governments want to get into every form of back trading or black market or saving money without them or not giving them what they think is their fair share. And then what's going on over here in China is either a trial run to tell you what's going to happen. You got all out fears as China launches missiles directly over Taiwan. You have intercepted airplanes that are happening. China launches 22 aircraft into Taiwan airspace to shadow every single other flight that's going around. They're deploying their aircraft carriers. They're firing 11 missiles in invasion drills periodically. And then you also got this article here from News World. China vows targeted military actions in response to Taiwan visit. But none of that scares me actually as much as this article from I forgot what it was, the Green Depot or Climate Depot, excuse me, which is talking about the UN suggesting that they're going to use military force to pursue climate agenda. In other words, in order to curb the evil farmers' emissions, they are introducing the idea that they could send troops, United Nations troops, to these farms across Europe, which, that sounds real familiar, doesn't it? Like the last go round of the World War, where armies started seizing and or burning any source of food for the public. So this is starting to look a little bit nuts. And then you have the whole energy power struggle between Russia and Europe. And then, of course, we have the Middle East involved in that. And if you didn't see in England, the Iranian embassy was ransacked and taken over for a little bit by a different kind of Muslim that doesn't run Iran, if you saw that. So things are getting really volatile in all of the areas of the world that they've have set up since the last World War to be the ignition points for any kinds of conflicts. And I don't think America is taking it serious. I think there's some kind of arrangement or like I don't know, a peaceful stand down where America, or at least the government that supposedly represented us, has already made so many deals with China that we're basically going to just fold for them. I don't actually think that we're going to have a large scale military thing, but both sides know that they can use war as an excuse for totalitarian lockdowns, for food shortages, for the blame game. Everybody can keep blaming the other side for, they can keep that going for decades. And the wow factor kind of, like we were talking about before, what else can they pull on everybody? It seems like they're not that worried about that too much. They like to give us a recombination of old things that they've done already. So, switch the bad guy, switch the names. The next presidential election, they're going to try to give us a rerun of Trump, and probably they're going to have DeSantis running so that there's some kind of inside Republican drama. And then on the other side, we'll probably get I forget the guy from California's name, but that's the direction and that they're going. And they keep trying to push. I mean, they're allowing people to just ransack, these big box stores, take whatever they want. They're not prosecuting it. We have DAs across the U.S. that are letting out violent criminals. And it all reminds me of the same moves pulled by the Nazi Party when they took over Germany in the 30s. It's the same playbook. And if you don't like that playbook, you can go look at the, Marxist revolutions or the color revolutions, and you can see all of the very exact same steps. But this time, we're going to have a global famine on top of these military interactions. So it's about time to start really, I don't know if that's conceited or selfish, but I think that the way forward is for people that have been taking what's going on seriously and preparing for the future do need to start making their own communities and their own economies And not only that, but a continual exchange of information, talents, and crafts, so that people regain like a Renaissance type mindset where each person has enough food at their home to fill their family's bellies so that they have time to start inventing new ways to live in a new era that cuts out these people like the UN. I mean, do you think that there will not be a war started if the UN actually brings armed military forces onto these farms and Germany or the Netherlands or any of these places that are now having protests? That will be at war. I mean, it may not happen like overnight, but after you see a few civilians get their farms taken, I think that somebody out there is going to fire the shot that's heard around the world again. Except for it'll be a start of a world war and not so there's no telling. They may start it in Taiwan to distract everybody for decades, but I think the real focus is on destroying Europe and the Americas right now so that China can be the new communist capitalist, if you want to say that. That's what they say, but really only the party gets to be the capitalist. They get to pick the winners and losers, something we've been arguing about here in America for a long time, that the government should not be picking winners or losers when it comes to the market of economy, because we know what happens. It becomes a communist socialist type arrangement. Those companies fail. The taxpayers have to bail it out. And then there comes a point eventually when the taxpayers do not have the tax to give over because now they're using all of their last resources to keep their properties, pay the taxes on it, and grow their own foods and have these little micro communities. So at some point, there's going to be a conflict in all of these countries when it comes to the idea that the world governance can tell you how to live your life, or the individual is in charge of their own life and could, grow and build and invent for themselves. So I think we are on the precipice of a new era in human evolution on so many different ways that I don't think that the generation that we're in right now is really going to be heavily involved in the next generation, because they're quite simply going to be culled out of existence because of conditions forced upon them by world governments, like hunger, war, pestilence, etc. It's the four horsemen of the apocalypse without the religious twist.
Painting such a rosy picture for me for next year's holiday in the Bahamas. Thanks for ruining it, Rad. So can't even enjoy a beach. Hey, I will say one thing on that. You said, well, if they do start to destabilize Europe, yeah, it won't happen to the rest of the world because somebody will wake up first. But -1, down one continent. Now, what's the next thing for the next continent? Well, if they get away with, moving on that and making the collapse happen over there, yeah, people will wake up. They absolutely will. But it'll still be -1. By the time they wake up in the place it's happening, it's already way too late. So they'll use something different, but then you got to realize that's -1. They're taken off the field completely, so there's no help going over to the other side, which would be North America, it looks like. It seems Australia's already compromised, so is New Zealand pretty heavily. But you ask about, Pelosi going over. Now, here's the thing that was explained to me, because I've done a couple interviews with Jeffrey Nyquist. Some of you know him, J.R. Nyquist. And I was listening to him just a couple days ago, and he was saying that Pelosi's been so pro-China for so long that the only way she can redeem herself, knowing that things are going to change, is to do this one last Hail Mary pass of, yes, they threatened to shoot me down. Yes, I'm the one who went over and started it all. And because the threat of China shooting her down, somehow she's now anti-China. So when it swings over into the anti-China rhetoric, that she was already there because they threatened to shoot her plane down. But for the last 50 plus years, she's been pro-China on every way, stance, form, business, money, economy, bribes, backhanded business deal, underhand, under-table stock deals, whatever. It all goes. But now she needs to reinvent herself in one single flight. Isn't that crazy how the whole world bought it? See how they did that so quickly, and now she's anti-China because she flew over there. But she had to erase 50 years of extreme pro-China, being borderline, shall we say, treasonous. Yeah, right. See, we're on the same beat. You know what I mean? You got it. So think about how that's all playing out. And if Europe does drop like a fly, well, that's just -1. See, you're talking about these psychopaths looking at the world as a chessboard. Okay, that piece needs to go down for the other ones to fall. So after Europe would go, I would imagine like New Zealand, Australia would be next, the England, of course, the UK there, and then over to North America finally, right? So -1, that's a huge, 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 huge one to take out, but it's -1.
To agree with Nyquist. That's exactly what I was thinking. I mean, I thought it would be more likely she was there negotiating their surrender to China than it would be that she was on Taiwan's side of any shape or form, because exactly that. She's always been pro-Chinese. The companies that her and her husband invest in are heavily Chinese. But the similar scenario is about to happen in the United States. They just the people here don't get it yet. But what's happening in Europe, I think, is going to happen here. The bureaucrats are coming, and they've already set up things, for the last a couple decades. And I know you know all about Agenda 2030 and how that they've messed with farmers and tried to put regulations locally, statewide, and nationally to reduce the amount of food that they could produce and reduce the amount of living that they could create for themselves. Similar things are happening in the United States, but it's a little bit different because what they're doing here is allowing Americans to sell out. So you have these multi-billion-dollar corporations, billionaires, and China buying up all of this farmland all across America, which means that they have control of it and that they could turn it on or off at any time. So instead of having, a little skirmish with military like might happen in Europe, over here they could just turn it off. That's how it works here now. If the companies get to a certain point, they don't care about their customers anymore. Politicians don't care about their constituents, and they just do what they want. And 9 times out of 10, it's in alignment with world governance or some kind of Chinese or billionaires' interest. I throw Bill Gates in there, but Bill Gates I can give a little credit to because he likes to tell you what his plans are for the future, and he's already done that. They plan on building these gigantic vertical grow buildings and GMO engineering and I can't say what they're engineering it for because I've already got in trouble for that. But you look into it yourself. What kind of foods are they going to be growing in these vertical
lettuces
buildings?
Lettuces.
Yes,
I'll guess
that's
lettuce.
right. But they have special properties, these lettuces. So we're moving into a new era of how shall I say it? Pharmaceutical and food growers being the same source for everything that you get. So all of your medicine, all of your food are going to be starting to come from the same people. And in my opinion, these people have already demonstrated their overall goal, which is openly stated that, if you've ever seen the TED Talks with Bill Gates, where he talks about his little formula up there, I forget the letters, but one of them is P for people. And then they have a letter for, greenhouse and et cetera and et cetera. And he says necessarily to turn this number down, which is greenhouse gas number, you have to reduce this other letter, which is people. And then he goes on to talk about reduction in population.
It's corporation. If you reduce corporation down, we get the CO2 leveling because it's not the people, it's the people consuming what the corporations are giving. So reduce the corporation, not the people. Sorry to cut you off. I had to split the hair there.
Well, that makes sense, but that's not the formula that he put up on the TED Talks. He put up a formula that involved reducing the number of the population to curb greenhouse gases. And think about the other asinine comment that he makes with that. In order to get one of those numbers, the number of the CO2 down to zero, right? What happens when it's down to zero? Think about that. Of course,
volcano.
Necessarily you can't have a world without carbon dioxide, period. No person that has any kind of scientific concept ever could really believe that plant food is bad for the earth. I mean, think about it. The plants make oxygen for us to breathe. They make our food. So of course, if plants have more carbon dioxide to grow more than everything else in our own formula, lifespan, food, air, they all go up too. But these crazy people are trying to tell you the reverse, and that they want to reduce the number of carbon dioxide down to a point where very little animals and plants could live on the planet, if any. I mean, like you said, we're at 420 parts per million the last time I paid attention, and they still want to reduce it further. And every other time that I look into an Earth's history, when the biozone of the Earth was flourishing, guess what? That CO2 number was very high. And so was the oxygen and the other things. So the world they're describing, the world that they think they're going to engineer, in my opinion, is not even made for a human being and the way that we consider it. And that might be why they put a lot of money into these seed arcs, vaults, and other things to store back the original copies of the first creation that they're toying with, because they plan on putting out nothing but their own creations, from people to food. And you can see that manifesting here in the United States with these massive buys of farmland across America. And you're going to see that continue. And meanwhile, everyone else is arguing about who shot Nelly in the belly with the meatball on the entertainment feeds. And then on the other feeds, they have everyone addicted to whether or not their party or their team or their guy is going to win an election, thinking that somehow, all of a sudden, in the first time in history, that the politicians are going to actually represent the people and not side with governmental groups and secret societies, if that makes sense. Maybe that's too far out there, but that's the way I see it.
Go, red team, go. Go, yellow team, go. That's the way we see it. Yeah, I got to do some simple math with you. If I could do a math quiz, a math question, I know it might be late in the evening, but it might be a dry question. But how many parts per million are there in the atmosphere? And then what's the total concentration of CO2 in Earth's atmosphere? So, Ransom, you were saying it's up to 420 now. Okay, they get those readings off of Mauna Loa. And that's one of the main stations up there. So let's say 420 parts per million. But what does that equate to in the full atmosphere? So we're going to take 100% of atmosphere and concentrations at 420 parts per million. You're looking at 0.004% of the atmosphere. 4/100ths of the atmosphere. 4/100ths of 1% of the atmosphere is CO2. 0.04. That's so small. That's not even 1%. So when you look at the total and they're saying, well, it's all this change, it's not even 1% of the atmosphere. Not even one. 4/100ths of 1%. See, that's how scary it is. They need to come up that scale 25x before you even get to the first 1%. And they're saying that this is going to change. Well, what about the volcanoes? Because in these grand solar minimum periods and declining electromagnetic field of the planet, because the sun's stepping down and its electric field affects the Earth, we're connected to it. We literally are. And you could use some of the old adages like mind, body, and soul. Yeah, well, we are definitely electromagnetically, magnetically, and spiritually connected to that star, our sun. So when you start to look at when that steps down, there's a huge amount of volcanoes go up. And they're trying to say that CO2 needs to come down. Does everybody understand out there that extinction level event, literally for all life on the planet, dies at 180 parts per million? We were at 280 million parts per million. And then we've come out of that, and now what? It's at 420. It's so close to extinction level event that the lowest it can go before all life extinguishes is a few hundred parts per million from where we sit today. But it's been as high as 7,000 parts per million, which is multiples well above this. Five of those 420 parts per million where we sit right now is only 2,000 parts per million. And it's been as high as 7,000 parts per million. So we're talking 35x what we have now has been in the recorded history of Earth. When, what Ransom talks about, these giant leaps, giant flora, giant fauna, was when it was at 7,000 parts per million, 35 times higher than it is today. And things were still growing and things were still moving, and there was water and there was ice. It seemed like the planet was very, very, very lush and super incredible, beyond abundant at that point. And here we are, whatever geoengineers from whatever matrix or AI or dimension or other celestial body and star systems through the universe and third dimensional reality popped over here and are trying to control it and geoengineer our beautiful blue planet. They're trying to take it down to 180 parts per million, which is the planet, everything on it, it goes into extinction. The ball of rock, it will be here. The consciousness of the earth, the core, it will be here, but all the species won't. And it'll reset to zero. Then if you bring the parts per million back up again, whatever didn't suffocate, like some plankton in a cave somewhere deep that didn't need photosynthesis or to be on the surface. That's how close we are to extinction. And they still want to bring us back toward that. So when you're right, like Bill Gates, when they want to bring down the CO2 levels, well, why do they want to bring us closer to a full extinction level on the planet for humanity versus going away from that and trying to pull us out of that danger? And that greenhouse growers, just for another factoid, generally they'll pump their greenhouses at 1,200 parts per million to get an incredibly high yield, especially for strawberries. Excuse me, because that's the most well-known case studies is strawberries, for how high that they would push the greenhouse gas, 1,200 parts per million, which is 3x higher than today, and they're getting record yields in those big, giant, juicy, plump strawberries. So why is it okay for that to get crop yield high, but we're going to the point where we're going to starve everybody out if the crop yields go lower because the CO2 goes lower, and the lower the CO2 goes, the functionality of our bodies and the planet goes. So why do they want to drag us down to this extinction level? I don't know.
I think it's because they have God complexes myself. And what better way to play God than extinct everything and then start making your own little creations? And I think we've heard this story before, whether it was real or not. The Sumerians wrote about something similar to the idea that we're coming across now, which is a bunch of people with God complexes, people of some kind with God complexes, that are creating life in their own image, right? And now today we have some pretty ugly type personalities that are also with the God complex. You could go with the transhuman group. You could go with the bioengineering group. You could go with the totalitarian group. But all of these people have these strange ideas for what they want to create on the planet. And this goes back to what you talk about a lot. What is the real power of manifestation and the observer changing reality by observing it? And I don't know what the answer to that is, but I do know that we're in a similar time. You got these characters that are not only trying to socially transform, but all the way down to the idea of maybe, in my opinion too, is extinct, 90% of things or 90% of people. And why would they stop with just people after a while? But these are people that believe that they have godlike abilities to create life. And now they're bragging that they don't even need people to make people. And doesn't that sound familiar? That they're just going to, inject these genetic materials into a man-made, embryo of some kind. They're going to make an embryo from scratch. Is even more out there than what we were talking about just a few years ago, which was just, playing around with the genetic material that was available. Now we're letting AI decide how to design said DNA. And there's so many different combinations of these fields of genetics and software that are combining an AI, that, yeah, these people believe they have the power of God. And if you read in, like, what Ray Kurzweil, I think, is the guy there that thinks that he's going to turn into some supercomputer in the future, and that's the direction of people, is to become gods themselves. um, we kind of are at that time, and that's exactly what I think it is why they would do this, for what purpose, is because they all have God complexes, and they are trying to do exactly what the massive amount of people around the world need to get together and do, and that's manifest their own reality. They are working hard with their billions of dollars of resources to manifest a reality that doesn't seem to be beneficial to the average human being.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if they do achieve that. When you talk with Kurzweil and their group there, the Singularity Project, if they achieve that point, would they run into the AI that was previously, and then what would happen when they met that matrix-like principles? But if they hit that singularity and then jumped into the same dimensional, whatever realm that is, that intersection of tech, electrovibration, electromagnetism, and then consciousness wound into some spark connect back to the great creator. If it was inside that AI also, that it met that thing in like AI space, for a better word, there's a vibratory pattern holding, and they jump into it also. And they think, we're gods up here, man. And then they meet the actual AI that's inhabiting that vibratory space that they think when they get there, they're going to control. But as soon as they jump in there, that is going to become a direct threat to the existence of the AI, because they're going to want to become more powerful than it, contain it, and make it work for them. So, there's a lot of where does it go when you go there? And when you arrive, is it a safe place? Because that singularity is stepping off onto that, merging man, machine, and artificial intelligence into, once you get plugged in there and you're in there, are you a friend or foe? Because you're in there in its space, not out here and disconnected into the flesh physical space. You're plugged in. That's a whole different set of things to consider and think about on these wearable tech. Like, where does it take you, and what do you stay connected with that whole time? And, subconsciously, what can be reprogrammed back in there? And that's the frightening part as well. What if they, found your greatest fear, and then if you didn't obey, they push that into your mind? Like, let's say you're afraid of spiders or something, I don't know. And suddenly your whole ceiling opens up and like 10,000 black widows drop on you at the same time or something. I don't know, something weird. But that thing was pushing those like receptors in your mind to make those images flicker. It turns on the movie screen in your head for you to run nightmares for noncompliance, or run pleasure for compliance. But either way, would you know that it was your thought? Once you were plugged in, you wouldn't know it wasn't your thought, right? Which brings me back to the whole thing. Are we in a matrix like this too, where we think we have thoughts, but it's not as programmed? And somehow there's a glitch in the programming. That's how me and Ransom are more able to talk about this. We broke through the mirror. We broke through the chrysalis. But a lot of people are going to start breaking through the chrysalis quickly here. I would say no later, Ransom, than September, that we're going to have another 10% of the world's population wake up to the fact of what's happening. And I think that manifestation of mind over matter, that extra 10% jumping in on the mind complex of manifesting using thought on this dimensional plane by the billions or hundreds of millions, is really going to start to have an effect and twist. And I think there might be like this cavitation in where we sit right now on this planet. The cavitation of two different thought patterns resonating, trying to overtake. And you know how when two wave patterns come together forcefully, they don't sync. One usually has to overpower the other and then smooth it. Just saying, I'm just talking about science here. Square wave, sine wave, sawtooth wave.
Yeah. Think about the progression of what you were talking about. A lot of people are still on the level of the external devices. And think about the evolution of that. If you go back and look at how long it took, humans to progress from stone tools, yada, 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 up until industrial revolution and then the tech revolution, in that last little, millisecond of time, we went from Walkmans to injectable chips. And then in the last, micro millisecond of that millisecond, we went from having to put a chip in to being able to grow a chip inside of you. Now, you can imagine all you want about the technological aspects of programming a human individual at that point. But they're making breakthroughs, like to go back to this article from NBC News, scientists reanimating dead cells in pigs. Anything that we've ever done in pigs. I wanted to go back to this part because that's a big part of it. It kind of, skips over that and then starts talking about transplants and et cetera, et cetera. We went down the road of, contaminating food supply with these created animals. But think about this idea. They're admitting basically that they can now reanimate dead cells in pigs. And this isn't the first time I've actually read about this. The first time they were talking about reanimating simple brain functions of the pigs after they died. Now, can you imagine a world where your information is not even protected in death? So first you have the evolution of technology that seems to be headed towards an internal connection to this transhuman movement. But people are still kind of thinking about things on the level of, nuts and bolts and wires and stuff like that. We're well beyond that. We're now designing organic technology that's, indistinguishable as far as its purposes on the micro scale of what it can do versus, nuts and bolts. You can't really, it's hard to make these nanobots, but you could grow genetic information that does approximately the same things. So if they're talking about reanimating dead cells, that they're looking into this technology. And I know this sounds far out there, but to circle back to all of the zombie programming that they have put in the past 10 years, it dominates entertainment. Zombie this, zombie that. I mean, I don't know how many versions of it that they have now. But think about this. And then they have other things that they're playing with, like the immortal cancer cell. And they're combining things like that with viruses. And I don't want to get into conspiracy theories about real life mRNA technologies, but just make believe for a minute that they actually can play with the telomeres, reanimate dead flesh, and put these parts in human beings, and then combine that with the technology of reprogramming DNA and or growing something in a human being using the elements and stuff that's already in the human. And now, unlike before, and I know I brought this up, before, even if you had this technology, it really wouldn't have the source material to build technology inside of you. But now we're contaminated with plastic and all kinds of other things. So all of the necessary materials are inside of animals and humans right now to, program it to make whatever you want. But then think about the other aspect of privacy and the fact that they're trying to merge our brains basically with their Wi-Fi system, whatever they're going to call it, the metaverse, et cetera. I'm sure it'll morph into something else. But they're showing that they can interact with dead material. So think about secrets from governments, scientists, even civilians that they didn't really want to share with anyone may not even be considered in the future, whether or not you have privacy. And if you grew a whole new generation of people that don't have parents, going back to the embryonic technology that they're talking about is the ability to grow humans without sperm or eggs, but just with genetic material. Now we're looking at a whole different kind of human evolution that sounds way out there, yet they're in the headlines today. So what is that space between headlines and reality of them actually putting it into action? And I'm telling you, I don't think it's that far away. It seems like they have built the logistics and the base for an AI computer runs society with robots, and evidently you could call what they're creating robotic humans if you want to, or organic machines, however you want to put it. That kind of answers that question about who's going to take care of the machines and how and why they would reduce a population by 90% or more down to about 500 million. And you wouldn't want a bunch of people that just were born or started living in this new world to come across something like the Georgia Guidestones out in the middle of the farm area and say, what's this? And then somebody actually does know how to read one of those languages on there. They would realize that they put forth a plan, like we were telling you, like they told everybody they were going to do, not unlike Bill Gates and all these other people that basically tell you to your face what their plans are. And if you say that you understand it or you recognize that they're telling the truth, guess what? You're nuts. You're a conspiracy theory, and good luck on getting your government ration of 252 grains of rice with your social credit score not registering with any of the vendors.
I'm going to have to dock you 12 grains of wheat on that per week for the next 52 weeks. That's going to be one less bite of food, so you're going to get 52 less bites of food per year because of that one comment. Now do it again 100 more times, and you'll end up with 1 grain of rice per day to eat. They're going to keep knocking your grains of rice or grains of wheat off. Your grams of barley, they're going to disappear in your food ration. You're going to have to toe. But again, you asked the question, so I might throw an answer, like how far away are we? I'm saying we're already 30 years past being in what you consider being that of AI integration with all the tech and everything you just described in the last minute. That was 40 years ago. It's been playing out in real time. And see, that's the psyop that I keep saying keeps going on, that it's always in the future, but you're being controlled by that system, which you think will be in the future, which is perfected to the point you don't even see it in real time in front of you today. That the perception of it being out there tomorrow as the control system coming in is already in such perfection and play that we're looking at 50-year-old technology that would have been publicly available. So think about the robotics they see in Boston Dynamics, whatever. What they're showing you in the videos today is decades old. So what do you think there is today? And could it fool a human? Because they're getting into the whole putting live skin and then having heaters in it, and these types of things you're getting into with the biometrics and the bioprinting and different types of things to make the skin have a real feel and appearance with real heat on it. On a robot, like wearable skin. And there was one movie, I forget, depicted it so clearly. But what you think is coming in the future is already here. In a sense of just general control over the populace. And it seems that within that, there's different programs running. Okay, now there's going to be a food shortage, Homodor. Periods of stability, periods of rebuilding, periods of collapse. It seems like this thing is gears and levers through the last 6,000 years doing the exact same thing with the exact same players, with the exact same. Wars are great for resetting economies. So every time thing runs like it is now to the end of its debt cycle and possibility to print on debt based on new activity economically has run its course to 0 minus 0. It needs to be reset. So then there'll be a war, and there's already a replacement for it, central bank digital currencies. In all these replacements that keep coming in continuously. Look at the last 6,000 years of history. Like nobody stopped fighting then? Has it been 6,000 years of war? Really? Is that the way humanity wants to exist? I don't think so. Because, man, I traveled to a lot of countries, and I'm not saying I traveled to a lot, but I did travel to a lot when I was young. That was my thing, was traveling. And everywhere I've gone, I've never met people who were just like at the baseline setting, wanted to fight and be in war. Never, not even one. They were forced into it, and they sure didn't want to be there. So the base setting for a human is peace and harmony, tranquility. And that's why people get so complacent, because when you're in that space of safe, everything, there's, wild animals aren't going to eat you. Basic needs are met because there's productive crops on something that does it at orders of magnitude larger. People get complacent. That whole thing of safety, 20,000 years ago when you had saber-toothed tigers running around, are you kidding me? Or after the Younger Dryas, like how did those villages and cities and whatever come together to survive such a cataclysm off an ice sheet evaporating into the atmosphere? Things were very tight. I don't see how humanity in its current form is going to move through this, because the last 6,000 years it is programmed to move through, and now we got this whole tech thing mixed in with the change. And not only that, but the sun and its electromagnetic field is changing inside all of these other changes. So it's like a sandwich cake of change. From what Ransom's talking about with the, wearable tech and transhuman and the singularity blended in with the decreasing electromagnetic field on the sun, spinning our Earth cloud cells and jet streams in a different ways and positions and more electrically active atmosphere that's affecting people as our crust charges differently. These things are all overlapping with the economy and in the 400-year grand solar minimum cycle, and all this, the civilization, the fourth turning, and it's all squeezing, and it's just supposed to be randomly happening organically. You can't tell me that, really. That's like 5 cycles overlapping right into this moment of time. And there's much larger cycles, I'm sure, that have been missed that are overlapping in time. And we sit on the galactic cross. We are at the crossing once again. Randall Carlson does the best work on the galactic cross, but every time we get to this period right about now, wham. What's interesting is you mentioned Younger Dryas era, Ransom, and that is one of the crossings as well. We're coming back into that same exact time frame of when the Younger Dryas occurred. 12,500 years is this cycle in itself also. So we're back again at the crossing. Last words, Ransom. You got 2 minutes and close us out. Thanks for coming on tonight, and thanks everybody for listening. Ransom, take us out.
All right. So check out my new channel, Mountain High Time, and beware of the sideboards. No, I'm just kidding. But think about what you would need to program DNA into the future to save information that the sun couldn't destroy. That might be where it's going.
A crystal the size of a sequoia is my final answer. See you next week. Bye. David Stein, Ramsey Battle, signing off.
Thank you for listening to Revolution